Hello and welcome to this Edexcel GCSE Geography topic overview. And for this session we're looking at the UK landscapes and coasts in particular. And these are just a short review of the key information. It's not everything you need to know, but you can look at these and use these with your class notes, revision guides and your own revision notes to make sure you've got the key understanding. When you've watched this, please try and have a go at making your own version of the mind map, or even have a go at making a video and send it on to me. Let me see what you can do. So, first thing that we always do, and it's really important, is that we have a look at the specification, so we know what the exam board want us to talk about. So as we look in here, we can see we've got to look at what the different physical processes are and how they relate to each other to create some of the coastal landscapes. We then look at the actual landforms, which are the smaller features that you would see within the wider landscape. We then, similar to rivers, look at the human activities and how they can change and alter the coastal landscapes. And then we need a case study area. So if we look at the mind map of the UK landscapes in its entirety, we can see the first section is the overview or the geology of the UK, which can be seen here. In one of the previous videos, we looked at the rivers section. But what's really important is that for rivers and coasts, they both involve great knowledge and understanding of the processes shown here. And so what I've done, instead of repeating them for each of rivers and coasts, I've just put that in the middle so you can see which is which. So if we have a look at the processes to start off with, a quick recap. So first of all, we have erosion. This is the wearing away of the land, so making the land disappear, if you like. There are four main types. Hydraulic action, the water, the force of the water getting into cracks, creating mini explosions, blasting it apart. Abrasion is where rocks and particles in the water actually rub against the rocks, wearing it away, like sandpaper. We then have attrition, which is where the rocks bang together and smash pieces off, and then solution, which is where some of the rocks are actually dissolved into the water. So following on from erosion, we have weathering. Now this is different because with weathering, it actually breaks the rock down and weakens it where it is rather than wearing it away. And there are the three main types. Biological is where plants and animals with their roots and burrowing can get into the soils and rocks and actually crack them apart. We then have chemical weathering, where the acid in rainwater, or if the rocks are particularly alkali, they can be dissolved into it. We then have mechanical, and this is generally to do with heat and temperature. And so if water gets into the rocks and into the cracks, if it freezes overnight, the water expands as it turns into ice, breaking it apart. The other type is exfoliation, is where the rocks heat up, and because they're not very expandable and they're not very elastic, the rock, the outer layer of the rock, cracks and breaks where it is. Now, erosion and weathering can be very much determined by the weather and the climate. So if you have a climate with a big range of temperatures, then this can have a big impact on the types of mechanical weathering. Types of rainfall or snow or ice or strong storms can have an impact on the erosion rates and weathering as well. So you need to know the links between the weather and the climate and how that can impact on erosion and weathering. The weather and climate can also have an impact on the two types of mass movement, sliding and slumping. The erosion can wear away the base of the cliff, meaning that it's unsupported, leading to its collapse. And heavy rain can weaken the material and provide fluid for it that helps it slide down the rock face or down the slope caused by gravity. We then have the transportation, the main types being the biggest rocks are rolled around. Saltation is where the smaller rocks can be bounced around by the power of the water. Suspension is the smaller particles which are held within the water, and this is why the water can often look dirty because of the suspended load. And then we have solution, where the rocks and sediment is dissolved into it. Now at coast, it's also important to recognise there is something called longshore drift. This is where the waves, because of the prevailing wind, these sometimes hit the coast at an angle, pushing the waves up the beach, called the swash, at a slight angle. The waves then lose energy and the water returns back to the sea by the power of gravity, called backwash. And you can see it leads to this zigzag movement along the coast. The final process is deposition. This is when the waves and the currents lose energy, and this means that they can no longer carry and transport the material and depositing it. And we'll see in a moment the different kinds of landforms that these can create. So all of these are important in forming coastal landscapes. Now, we also need to look at the different landforms that can form. So we can get the erosional landforms. Now these can often relate to the types of geology and the way that the rocks are lined up at the coast. So if we have a discordant coast, this is where the rocks are aligned at right angles. And often, if you have layers of harder rock and softer rock, the harder rock is more resistant to erosion and the softer rock erodes more rapidly, forming these inlets or bays. The bits that are sticking out are called headlands. Now on these headlands there are still weaknesses even though the rock is more resistant. So what can happen is the hydraulic action and abrasion can get into the small cracks in the rock, making the cracks bigger into a cave. Over time, the erosion continues until the cave gets bigger and can sometimes be eroded all the way through the headland, forming an arch. Erosion continues, and along with weathering and mass movement on top of the arch, this can lead for the top of the arch to collapse, leaving a piece of rock stood all out on its own, leaving a stack. Then over time this can be eroded even more till the stack collapses, leaving a stump. Now also on harder rock cliffs, and particularly with sedimentary cliffs, we can find things such as wave cut platforms and wave cut notches. This is where between the high and low tide line, the waves can erode the base of the cliff until eventually the cliff is overhanging and then it collapses. This causes the cliffs to retreat inland, leaving a new cliff face and then leaving a flat platform at the base of it going out to sea, called the wave cut platform. The other thing you need to know are the depositional landforms. So when the waves lose energy, they can deposit material. Now, in the bays, because the waves are refracted and there's less energy, they can often form beaches within the bays and the headlands sticking out either side. Sometimes where there is a change in the coastline and the waves travel at an angle, then the material can start to get deposited into the bays along the bays. This forms these sandy spits, which appear to be sticking out to sea. And often behind the spits, if there is a river that is flowing out to sea, the sediment from the river can form behind it, leading to salt marshes behind the spits. If there is no river in the bay, then there's nothing to wash the end of the spit away, and so bars can be formed. This can lead to two headlands being joined up, and then there being a lagoon of stagnant water or still water just behind it. So those are the main landforms within the different landscapes. We then need to look at the human interactions of it, and we need to look at the different land uses, so how humans can use coastal areas for agriculture, for settlement and for industry, because the land is close to the water. It's also good, got the flat land so it's easy to build on, and it's also good for transporting large goods. Now, because there is human interaction on the coastline, this means that things like coastal recession, where the coast is retreating or eroding, and coastal flooding can have many problems. Now, coastal recession can be caused by a number of physical and human factors. The physical factors are the power of the waves, the distance the wave has travelled, and the power of the wind can all have an impact on wave energy. The bigger the waves, the more erosional power there can be. Rock type is also important, because obviously softer rocks or less resistant rocks will erode and recede more rapidly. And also weather and climate can be key, as we looked at for weathering. So all the things here are those which will affect the natural processes. But also humans can have an impact on it. Sometimes by placing different types of management on the coast, this can lead to lack of sediment, meaning that beaches are smaller further down the coast, meaning that smaller beaches, less of the waves energy is absorbed by the beach, leading to more rapid erosion. With flooding, human causes of coastal flooding could be the fact that the same for river flooding, with more settlement, deforestation, leading to more river flow. And because the rivers flow to the coast, if the sea levels are rising, then the water has nowhere to go, so it will flood out onto the land next to it. Also, with climate change, the increasing number of storms is going to lead to storm surges and more powerful waves, which again could flood the low-lying land. Now, it's also important that you understand the effects of flooding and coastal recession, people losing their houses, losing money, the impact on jobs and on infrastructure, and the impacts on environment, on the wildlife and on the habitats that are there. Now, there are ways in which humans can manage the coast, and you need to know the two main types and then examples of each of the main types within it. So first of all, we have hard engineering, and this is where we use large, expensive structures to try and reduce the physical processes, using sea walls to reflect wave energy and something hard just to stop the coast receding. There may be groins, which are built out to sea and stop the process of longshore drift, allowing bigger beaches to form up behind them, absorbing more wave energy. And then we have riprap, large rocks which are placed at the base of a cliff or the base of a seawall. And again, because of the gaps between them, as the water comes in, these absorb the wave energy, meaning there's less energy for erosion. Now, seawalls are also good because not only do they help protect from erosion, they can also protect from flooding as well. Then we have the soft engineering approaches, where we have beach nourishment, and this is where they just dredge up sand from offshore and place it onto the beach to make the beach longer and higher. This is to absorb wave energy. And then offshore reefs, and these are just big rocks and boulders placed several hundred meters out to sea, again just designed to absorb the wave energy, so there's less energy at the coast to erode the land there. So this is everything in its entirety. Remember, UK landscapes, all of these are worth 30 marks in total. So there is 6 marks for the geology, so you'll only get short questions for these, and then 12 marks each for rivers and coasts. And remember, for rivers and coasts, you are going to have an 8-mark examine question. Now, the 8-mark examine question, you will get 4 marks for your knowledge and understanding of the processes, and then another 4 marks for using the information within a resource to link it to your explanation. So it's very important for those 8 marks that you are looking at the resource and you're giving evidence from it. You're either quoting from statements or you're giving compass directions, scale, and you're using some of the terms from the resource there. So finally, if you need to, just with the case studies are always good because they put into play all of the geographical learning and put it to a relevant place. So it may be a chance to review, go through your revision guide, and then just have a go at completing this sheet again. So I hope you found that useful. Thank you very much for watching. Please check out the other videos in the series and hopefully see you again soon. Many thanks. Bye.